As a general statement, when people visit my back garden, they typically have one comment: it is so full of plants. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome once again to my exotic tropical style garden here in Zone 5B, Southern Ontario, Canada. This is part 2 of my exotic garden update 2023. Today we are focusing on the back garden. Those of us who are passionate about tropical and exotic plants, once we start collecting, it's difficult to know where to draw the line. Many visitors to my garden have the same first comments: wow, there are so many plants, or this is like a nursery or a botanical garden. This year, to say my garden was crammed full of plants would be an understatement. I always propagate way more than I need for this season because you never know what winter's going to hold, and it's nice to have some insurance for the following year. I also experiment with growing new plants which may be introduced into my garden in the front or the back in following years. I also do my plant propagating, including cuttings and growing from seed. Well, let's start with some of the largest plants in my back garden. I have two Washingtonia robustas, or Mexican fan palms. This is the largest of the two. This past summer, with all the rain we've had, the leaves and fronds were just pristine. Here's a brief look at my largest Washingtonia robusta. Here's a closer look to give you an idea of scale. It looked amazing. And this is the size of the trunk. And this is the smaller one. Now, it is actually catching up in size. They still seem to be widening their trunks instead of putting on upward growth. The smaller of the two has nearly caught up as far as the trunk base diameter at ground level. The fronds are much wider on the smaller Washingtonia and the petioles are much longer. It is becoming quite a sizable plant in its own right. Now with the smaller one, it is in competition with the red banana, the Insete ventricosa morellii. My initial thought when planting it was, well, the palm is fairly small at this point, and the red banana is much faster growing, and it should outpace it no problem, but that was not the case. Not only is the palm catching up, but its petioles are tearing up the banana leaves, and they've been fighting it out all summer long. The Abyssinian red banana in the ground for its second summer, having been successfully overwintered, is now becoming a real beast. It was pumping out a new leaf 10 foot or 3 meters long every week during peak season. Most of us who grow this banana do lift it in the fall, prune it back heavily, and then store it dry indoors. I found by growing it in the ground, it is a much beefier plant. It puts on growth much quicker in the spring, and overall it just produces massive leaves. Again, this video does not do it justice for this scale. It was a very impressive looking plant. Next to that we have a Sago palm, or Cycas revoluta. I currently have 3 Sago palms. The one in the back garden has also flushed out new leaves and looks fantastic this year. The leaves are so vibrant and green, it's becoming very full and thick. We have a Fatsia japonica. This past year, it has grown very, very well, in fact too well. It was too large to enclose in the cold frame, so I did have to prune it back heavily. Each year, the Fatsia does start to flower around October time. Here's what the flowers look like. I have one large Trachycarpus palm in the back garden. It's fairly tall, close to 10 feet or about 3 meters. It has a very dense crown with short fronds. I'm currently growing several Phoenix roebelenii, or pygmy date palms. Currently they are all in containers, and I have several sizes. In the ground I have this rosemary. It's been in the ground roughly since 2017, and it's currently about 5 feet tall and wide. I do trim it back, and I do use it for cooking. It does produce these beautiful blue flowers. This petunia did overwinter at the base of one of my palms. Like I said, I do use the C9 Christmas lights method, and it doesn't take much for a lot of these things to survive, just a little bit of heat and protection. I also grow several varieties of flowering ginger. The one that stands out this year is the Hadium coronarium. has formed thick clumps and has flowered beyond my expectations. I have several in the ground and several in pots. The ones in the ground are much beefier, much bushier looking plants. They have both flowered, and the flowers are gorgeous. They do resemble butterflies with their wings spread. It produces many of these white flowers in succession, and you just cannot get enough of the aroma. Apart from flowering plants, I also grow many foliage plants. Some of my favorite foliage plants this year were the philodendron xanadu. So this past year, the loquat tree did put on quite a bit of growth, but in the fall, no flowers. So I'm not sure what was lacking. I'm hoping that it will produce fruit one of these times. One of the largest foliage plants is this elephant here. And these include Portora and this Alocasia macrorrhiza. Now this is becoming a real monster of a plant. This plant was seed grown and it is many years old. The leaves look pristine until mid-October when we had windstorms which shredded it and any other large banana-like plant. This year it flowered again. Once a flower bud is large enough and the top portion starts to open, you break open the top portion of the pod. This is where the pollen is located, and at the bottom are the female flower parts, so you break it open as well. The pollen will naturally gravitate down, and it does pollinate itself. And speaking of flowering plants, nothing says tropical like hibiscus. I grow many varieties of the tropical hibiscus, Rosa sinensis, in many colors. Some are single flowered and some are double. Here's a brief look. Here's a brief look at some of the exotic flowering plants I do grow. I will put the names on the bottom for reference. Here's a brief look at some other plants I'm trying to overwinter in the ground. This Tibucina or princess flower, it has these magnificent bluish flowers. Now I am trying to overwinter this in the ground. Watering can be key to having it succeed or not. And I understand they will take a fair bit of cold, but the key is not to overwater it during winter. So we'll see what happens next year. I'll keep my fingers crossed. I'm also trying to overwinter a few other plants for the first time. Typically, I don't comment on such things until they've successfully been in the ground at least 2 years. Some of the plants I am experimenting with include a papaya tree, some pomegranates, some alocasias, Kimberly ferns, and literally the list goes on and on. They are first-time attempts, so we'll see what happens. Again, I am using the C9 Christmas lights method. Here's another look at some of the flowering plants that I am growing. In an upcoming video, I have some big changes coming for the following year, so stay tuned for that. Well, that pretty much wraps up the back garden tour. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. Once again, thank you so much for watching, for sharing your time. If you have enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And until next time, happy gardening.